Welcome to That Pennsylvania Witch podcast. My name is Katelyn Dawn. Thanks for joining us today. Hello, and thank you for tuning into That Pennsylvania Witch podcast. It has officially been a year since I started this podcasting journey, and I am extremely grateful for all of the support and for all of the opportunities to host incredible people. On today's episode, I welcome my childhood friend, Timothy McKenna. Timothy is in design, and I wouldn't have expected him to be interested in coming onto a podcast about spirituality, but he's had some recent experiences with meditation, and I can't wait to share them with you. Thanks for tuning in. Tim, I'm really glad to have you on today. I have known you for, we just figured it out, 26 years.
Thank you so much for having me on. I was also trying to math it in my head of like, when did we meet? And it's time does really fly but that was eighth grade. And yeah, here we are. How many years later?
Yeah. Elder millennials in our prime, right? It
I
is.
love the elder millennial title. It sounds like an outer god from H.P. Lovecraft, except just more hip.
We're eldritch horrors. We're the eldritch horrors of the millennial designation. Tim, you're a design and product leader. You've led design teams for 20 years. You used to be a musician. And I know this because we were alt kids and we both listened to like the metal and the punk in school. But you have now led startups, global tech companies. You taught design. Can you tell me about that at York College?
Yeah. I had taught a web design class, part of the School of Design, Arts, and Hospitality at York College of Pennsylvania. I have a number of colleagues that are professors there who knew me through other design-related organizations such as AIGA. And I also just took a big interest in students, like making sure that they were having the right guidance so that they can get into the industry and have success like I did. So through that, I got kind of tapped and asked if I would teach a web design course, as I had the most modern and applicable experience to teach web design for students in a typical graphic design program. And that started in 2018. And I had been teaching at York College of Pennsylvania ever since, basically whenever I have enough students to warrant a class. I had also taught previously a data design course at Harrisburg University prior to that, a number of years before that, before they started their UX program. So I've been teaching for a long time.
Yeah. Well, you're a great teacher. I mean, you've been helping me learning the ins and outs of different tech things because this podcasting journey and the other things that I've been doing, teaching classes online, holding workshops and online symposiums is new to me, and there's always a learning curve. You're ridiculously patient and you are a wealth of knowledge. I hate that expression. I think I'm the type of person that says that now though, because I've said it like 3 times. So I'm just gonna make it part of my identity, I guess.
I am
So
the best person to play Trivial Pursuit with because my head is filled with so much random stuff
yeah.
that, I'm pretty good with coming up with things off the fly.
Yeah, I dig that. Do you also have just like random hyper focus events where you go off on a tangent? You know what? I don't know a whole lot about the Celtic gods. I'm going to spend 3 weeks researching that, or is that just me being crazy?
No, I'll definitely do a deep dive. Like, I think there's an old internet term of going down the click hole of
Yeah.
just like going through Wikipedia and just reading through stuff. I really enjoy tying things together. Like, okay, why do we say, there's 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon? And then I learn like, oh, here's how casting works, and here's how this is how we have 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon because of all the different people he's been, part of movies with. And then it's like, well, how are movies, like how does casting work? So then I'll go down that rabbit hole as well. So then I find out, like, I've just been spending 4 or 5 hours on Wikipedia, and then I go from 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon to U.S. American like rocket program. And I'm like, how
Right.
did I get here?
As one
So
does. As one does.
yeah,
We're
as one
kin.
does.
Yeah. Um, so what the heck are you doing here? I bet everybody's wondering that. It doesn't sound like your dossier kind of lends to someone who might be a more spiritual person, but recently things have kind of taken a turn in that direction for you, haven't they?
Yeah, and one that I did not expect, one that I would not have actually actively pursued, and one that has been very surprisingly um, fortuitous for me. So, so let me set the stage a bit. Thank you for the really great introduction. I'll use that to build on top of everything. So, I've been working as a designer for the last 20 years, and I have moved up in my career where I've been a hands-on individual contributor designer, initially in like visual design and graphic design and doing some of the more marketing stuff, and then kind of elevated into more front-end web development, user interface design, user experience design. And then my responsibilities were growing and growing. And I started off in healthcare organizations, healthcare tech companies that were building really crazy, amazing products that were going to help type 1 diabetics to be able to forecast their blood sugar glucose in the middle of the night.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
working on all of these different things and then eventually managing people and then, having greater and greater success in my career. I've done everything from healthcare organization type work, startup work, government services, trying to make government services in Pennsylvania suck less. Um, Long story short, they don't, they still suck. Um, but then moving into large enterprise SaaS platforms, like software as a service, that's what SaaS is. And these are global products that people, if you were to look me up on LinkedIn, you're like, I know that product. I've probably used that thing. And throughout my career, I have been growing and leading larger teams. At one point in time, I led a team of 50 that was doing all government services for federal government as well as local and state. And then more recently, I had been building a team in India and had been managing a team all across the continental United States and Canada. So I'm on this role of like continued professional development, continued growth. And it was a very at the time that I thought successful. Like I've made it. I'm doing a hell of a lot better than what my parents ever thought. Like I'm proving to myself that, I am a quote unquote big dog in regards to all of these like influential design leaders. I'm going to conferences. I'm getting invited to speak at conferences, both in the United States as well as internationally. And my my measurement, my yardstick of my growth was based off of my bank account, was based off of how much money and equity I'm getting, how much clout, social clout that I had. And it was at the time I thought, well, this is it. Like this is my existence. Like I'm gonna be the Michael Beirut of UX design, and everyone's going to fear and love and adore me because I'm a very powerful persona. Then I got laid off. In July of 2023, I was working at a tech company and they laid off the entire product and design organization.
Mm.
And so much of that buildup I just told you was so tied to my identity of like who I am, what I'm all about. Like I'm known as the tech guy. I'm known as this. Like that all came crumbling down because I was let go. And my world kind of shattered. It got really dark. Like, all right, I applied for unemployment and I started hitting all the job boards. And I live in South Central Pennsylvania. There's not a lot of like local jobs for what I do. So a lot of the companies that I've worked for have been based out of Boston or San Francisco or LA. So I ended up applying for over 5,000 jobs inside of 4 months.
5,000 jobs.
5,000 jobs. Now, that might sound incredulous, but I was looking at everything at like what my level was, like a director of product design. I was looking above. So I was hitting above like a VP, head of design, SVP, but I was also going below too. I was going to design manager, even back to individual contributor, because here I am in this when I bought this house this is at the time only 2, 3 years in. So nice new house. I've got a family with two small kiddos. My wife works and she works in a very completely different field. So we have a disparity with our kind of incomes for everything. Plus a lot of just like my identity, my pride was attached to my work. So I was applying for everything under the sun. And every job that I applied to, every rejection email, or just outright ghosting from those companies, just whittled away at my ego, whittled away at my self-worth, and I was getting desperate. And it really made me kind of look at everything. I had not taken this much of a break in work in over 30 years. Like I started working when I was 14, working at Sheets and even before that, I used to deliver newspapers back when I was in middle school and high school. So I had been working all my entire life. Not a hustle culture mentality, but like I kept myself busy and I based a lot of my value off of what I produced
So,
and
like,
my output.
your worth was dependent on how productive you could be, how
Right,
much you could acquire, and it was directly tied to that.
right. And I took absolutely no time to look at anything else besides the material, besides like what's right in front of me. I had always had like a tangential interest in mythology and cultural studies, anthropology. I always found people's um, religious and spiritual practices always interesting, but from more from like a cultural historical perspective.
Yeah, like
For
look at what those
myself,
people do.
yeah. But I
Yeah.
was like, from my own perspective, I'm like, yeah, that's dumb. I'm
Hmm.
not going to do that. Like anyone else's beliefs. And I believe a lot of that was colored by having grown up going to a Catholic school. Now, I'm
Um,
not completely going to like poo poo on the Catholic Church or anything, but just like going to a Catholic school was very eye opening in regards to you're either one of us or you're not. So coming to public school was a big freeing event for me. So a lot of that early bias, a lot of that early experience colored a lot of my approach to like anything what I would call quote unquote spiritual, anything I would call quote unquote religious. I lumped it all into one big bucket that I called bullshit. And that's how I treated it for the longest time. Like it had to be like I needed to know what's right in front of me. And I had read some really what I would call weird stuff. Like I've read through different occult books when I was younger, mostly to like make my Dungeons and Dragons games better. So
hell yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so was it interesting? Sure. Did I think about any of this stuff? No, absolutely not. And I read some stuff that like this sounds great, but it also sounds childish and impractical. But again, all of that was just kind of like background. My real main interest was like, how do I get my social clout to get higher? How do I get invited to more and more conferences? How do I get my name out there? I wanted to be like Peter Merholz or Ryan Rumsey. I'm dropping names. These are big names of design leaders and influential people in my industry. People I do look up to, but outside of my industry, no one knows or cares about them. But I was really trying to position myself to be like them. I wanted to be like a name, an industry name.
And you
So
were
when
on
I
the
got laid
way,
off,
right? You were
yeah,
on the way to that. So when you started acquiring these things and having these successes,
yeah,
how did it feel?
there was a momentary feeling of hell yeah, like
Yeah.
I'm recognized, but it was fleeting. It was kind of like a drug in a lot of ways, where it's just like, oh yeah, I got that high. Like someone recognizes me. There's my face on a billboard speaking at this event. Like it was like, oh yeah, look at that. Look at that. That's great. But it was always momentary and fleeting. I'm like, all right, what else do I got to do? What else do I got to do to get that? Chasing it. It was like chasing a high all the time because none of it ever brought any sort of fulfillment. Everything was just like a notch, a milestone, but it never mattered because I had to go to the next one. I could not rest on my laurels, I would say. And I would also say, like, if I had to be like a shark survives by swimming. If they stop swimming, they die. So that's how I viewed my entire professional. I had to keep going. So when I was involuntarily forced to stop, world shattering kind of a experience happened for me. So I'm spending the next couple of months in the summer of 2023 applying for jobs, just applying every day, glued to my computer. And I'm getting desperate. I'm getting, I'm having anxiety attacks. I'm having um, lapses in my like clarity of things. And my mind started taking me to some really dark places that would have been a lot of finality if I would have walked through them.
Yeah.
Something happened that I really still cannot quite explain what exactly it was, but I was on a particular website looking up a particular thing that told me how I could end a lot of the suffering that I was going through, if you catch my drift. And I was in like a point of just like, am I even considering this? Like, what is going on? Like, why is all of this going wrong in my life? And then I got the clearest message in my head that said, stop and just sit still. And at that point, I'm like, WTF, what is going on? Tim, you have literally fallen off the cliff. Why am I getting this like very clear voice, like very clear message in my head? Just stop and sit still. And then something just, I sat still, just breathed, and and then the word meditate came into my head. Now, I had tried meditation when I was younger. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and I didn't know what to do. Like I
Yeah.
felt like I felt like that character from Talladega Nights. Like I don't know what to do with my hands. Like I don't know what to do. So, but I just sat there and I breathed, closed my eyes and I breathed, and then I started getting a really reaffirming, calm feeling over me that said, "This will be okay. This will pass." And I remember coming out of this room here, going to my wife and being like, I don't know what's going on. I feel like I'm going crazy. Something is telling me to relax. My wife, God love her, is just like, was it me? And I'm like, no, it wasn't you. Something else. She's
That
like, of
sounds like
course.
something I would say.
Yeah, yeah. She's like, of course. You're not gonna listen to me. You're gonna listen to the weird voice in your head.
I adore your wife, but continue. Thank you.
I love my wife too. So well, our snarkiness plays well with each other. So for the next couple of days afterwards, was still going through and applying, but then this clear, it's not really quite a voice, but it was more like I see just text in my mind. It just says, stop, relax, meditate. And I felt like I was being guided to look at something that I had never considered, which was more of like a part of my life that I just never fulfilled. Like I never gave it the nourishment, the sunshine that it needed. Call that spirituality. Call that, I don't know what you would call it. I call it spirituality because there's no sort of like in my mind there's no dogma, there's no rules. It's just like you need this to feel like a complete human. And when I heard those words, complete human, and I'm like, that's actually very accurate. I don't feel complete. I was always chasing those highs from professional milestones, but I never felt complete. So, what ended up happening was over the next couple of weeks after that event, I really delved into meditation. I did it for hours on end each day. And afterwards, I found out what these experiences were. I had I think what was coined as a dark night of the soul. Like I had a 5 day period where I was completely destroyed as a human being, weeping openly, like just questioning everything, and then having experiences where I would meditate and I'd see a younger version of myself, and I would tell myself to the younger version of myself, it's okay. I didn't know what these things, these experiences were called. You shared like terminology with me much later after you and I synced up about this. We'll get into that. But I had all of these different experiences, and then slowly my outlook on everything changed. I started applying for other jobs. I started getting interviews. And I went through an interview process that took months, but I finally got a new job in December of 2023. And funny story enough, I was interviewing with another company. I got two offers the same day. So here I went from no offers, nothing, to having two companies wanting me to join them. And I had to pick between them on the same day. Ever since that summer, I ended up really kind of pouring more and more energy and more focus into this. And it made me start questioning a lot about, well, what am I doing in my life? Like, who cares if my bald head is plastered on a billboard for a conference? Like, all the things that I thought were important in my life just seemed so minuscule and so like not worth it. And ever since then, I have developed a practice of meditation, daily meditation, and a real focus on how I interact with people. My interests now are almost completely different. I mean, I still work in design and I still lead a design team for everything, but I don't put any sort of weight towards that professional side like I used to. So here I am now. A I'm practicing my meditation every day. I've explored a lot of different, some religious, mostly spiritual textbooks and things, all as part of like this overall seeking and understanding to understand more about me. And that eventually led to you and I syncing up again, which was really funny because when you and I had known each other for years, but we had never talked about any of the stuff that we're doing today until after I had a past life regression. And
Yes, that was.
that kicked off more for us.
Can you talk about that modality? So
Yeah,
just to we'll jump into that. Like I cannot wait to jump into that with you.
sure.
I just want to acknowledge it. I want to thank you for sharing because I think that we stigmatize mental health and we stigmatize struggling. And I will say, especially for men, we stigmatize that quite a bit. In general, it's stigmatized, but I just feel like there's a lot of this toxic masculine undertone in our society, especially for cishet men, all men, really, anybody who identifies as male. But mm, you're describing something that I think so many of us have experienced, where you base your identity off of something that absolutely has nothing to do with your true self. Sure, your creative design was your true self, but you were trying your best to provide for your family. You were kicking butt at it. You were becoming like essentially, you were becoming famous, but you still had, and I experienced this myself. I did not become famous, let's be real, but I did also experience that destination anxiety. So if you can get this job or this title or this promotion or this book deal or whatever, then happiness is waiting for you at that point.
Hmm.
And you just keep walking that path, but in the meantime, you're not here, you're not present, you're not grounded, you're not experiencing life. And at some point, people will either abandon the idea of being mindful or the interconnectedness of all things and continue on that path, or they will have a kind of awakening, like what you're describing, the dark night of the soul. I can't tell you how many people in my workshops have explained and described exactly that. Luckily, though, we have a lot of resources now. You describe the modalities that you're using for meditation, the recordings, the whatever works. However you need to get there is valid. And the experience you described was just so important and so valid. And I just wanted to thank you for sharing that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad that you kind of called out, the issue that we have with mental health stigma for men. There is a lot of expectations societally that we have in this country. There's a lot of like implicit expectations that men put on themselves. And there's a lot of factors and variables for there. And this is not specific only just to men. I think
No.
in the broader sense, just there is a lot of implicit expectations and this pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality of like, oh, you can only fix like no, mental health is healthcare, and it's important to look at your mental health just like how you would if you are going to get a physical. If that's how you're taking care of any other sort of like physical things, like you need to make sure that it is seen, valued, and treated just like any sort of like physical or internal thing as well. And I think if we can get to a point where we have a lot of sympathy and a lot of empathy for people who like have an outward facing kind of issue or something. Like you can see it, like, oh, they're on crutches or this or that. Like we tend to always have like a sympathy towards that. But if we just have like an ounce of that and we apply that just how we interact with other people, because you don't know what is going on with their mental health as well, just that small change in how we approach people and how we talk with people would have massive positive ripple effects
Oh,
throughout their
yeah.
day. So,
Oh, and not
yeah,
to mention accessibility. It's expensive to seek professional help. I always tell people that are trying to look for relief, I am not a therapist. I suggest going to therapy. If therapy is not accessible for you, I
yeah,
suggest researching and asking spiritual communities if or just people who are really into meditation,
yeah,
because really meditation is what saved my life too, Tim. And I can't stress enough how beautiful the feeling is once you recognize that you are not an island. There is a big interconnectedness of all things happening at all times, and it's really beautiful. And it doesn't matter what your, like you said, there's no dogma attached to it. There doesn't have to be. It doesn't
right.
matter what your belief system is. There's so many common denominators there.
Agreed. Yeah. So it was something that I want to stress again was like I would have never on my own accord like proactively looked for any of this information on meditation. I think what happened was all the stuff that I read earlier, just out of like pure curiosity and interest, like seeds were planted in my brain, and then whatever was telling me to chill out, relax, was like going into my mental library and being like, yoink, hey, go look at this, which then prompted a proactive seeking of like, what am I experiencing? What is this? Am I going insane? Um, and why do I have this now intense curiosity to go out and look at things? And I would say the thing that I first came across in this new mode where I was going through like daily questioning of my sanity and my reality. Um, Something I had read years and years and years ago, just as like an interest fluke. I thought it was pure insanity when I read it the first time, but then when I started rereading it again, I was like, wait a minute, this tracks. I rediscovered the raw material, RA, raw, the sun god, raw. This is a channeling session back in the 80s. This was meant to, I think the investigators were trying to learn more about like UFO content stuff, but what they stumbled upon was a very wide-ranging history of the world, thinking about things. And a lot of what the channeling said was like, take only what makes sense to you. Use your discernment. And I'm reading through stuff, and I remember reading this years ago. I'm like, oh yeah, this thing talks about Bigfoot. It talks about Galactic Confederation. I'm like, no wonder where Gene Roddenberry came up with Star Trek from. He was contemporaries with some of these folks. Like, all of this stuff seemed insanity to me when I was younger when I read it. But then when I was reading through it, it just basically said, like, look, you don't have to believe any of this. We're not trying to sell you on anything. The key message was growth. Well, the key message was understanding yourself, balancing yourself. And I'm like, this started to make, I felt a visceral physical reaction in me reading it. I'm like, this is hitting differently. And then that message in my head just kept telling me, keep reading this. So I consumed all 4 books, and they are not easy books to read. They read like a postdoctoral dissertation on acid written by a space alien, like, which may be the case because the language in it is not accessible. Like, the language is a high level read of, like, sometimes physics, sometimes like how consciousness works. I'm like, that's great. So it was a little difficult to read, but a lot of the messaging really came through around, like, the key to creating a life in this experience right now: meditation, understanding karma, understanding balance, self-forgiveness, which was the big thing that really, really hit home for me because I never forgave myself for anything, which was why I always try to get more and more earlier on in my life. I was like, no, I don't need to self-forgive. I don't need to accept myself. I just need to get my name bigger on that marquee. Let's just bury and repress all the things I don't want to talk about and just go for success. This reading allowed me to tell myself I'm okay. And that was so powerful. Like, that hit home more than any other sort of message I'd ever received.
I think, that's it's so fascinating. Like, where does your journey begin? And everybody has this. I think the first episode of my podcast, and one of the first things I've ever written, was entitled "Origin Story." And thank you for sharing your origin story. It's something I really wanted to get back to on the podcast. I love interviewing authors. I love interviewing figureheads in the pagan or esoteric or occult community. But I also love the idea of experiencing an awakening and then wanting to share it with, because that's what you do. You basically are describing experiencing some sort of an awakening
Yeah.
or connection. And then you went out on a journey. You were seeking and you were looking for your people, or, just looking for something. You were seeking, and it's not always people or a group. It's not always one type of spirituality, but I can't tell you how many people have told me that story. And I do remember a while ago, when your wife told me you were meditating, my eyebrows shot up and I was like, oh, Tim and I are going to be having a talk soon. I think because so I discovered this, I mean, when I was little, I tell this story all the time. I'm sure my listeners are probably like, get on with it, lady, but tough. You're going to listen again in case you're new. My sister was really into anthropology in high school. She was obsessed. So I watched all the VHS tapes with her, those horrible scholarly published VHS tapes about different cultures, different belief systems. One of them did mention meditation. I actually ended up at the library and I found a book in the anthropology section at the Bosler Library in Carlisle. I know, I love that library so much. If any locals haven't been, it is really beautiful and it's right in the historic part of Carlisle. You can't go wrong. And so it was Margot Adler drawing down the moon. And of course, I was drawn to it because of the cover art and that sort of thing. But I was also drawn to it because of the title. It was fascinating to me. It was in that section. I thought my sister was super cool, so I wanted to make sure that I was emulating her appropriately. I was a weird kid. But that was actually a big deal for me to read that. And it was hard to get through as a kid. I had to Google stuff. Well, oh my gosh, no, I couldn't Google at that time. I don't think we even had Ask Jeeves yet at that point in time. I was using our hardback encyclopedias, like rifling through them or writing down other books, from the sources to go get next time. But the title of the book is Drawing Down the Moon, Witches, Druids, Goddess Worshippers, and Other Pagans in America. And I remember as a kid being like, huh? Like I was sitting with my sister, watching all of these videos about people in the Middle East, people in Africa, people in Asia, people in, just all over the world. And I never thought, I was like, oh, that's weird that I didn't know that that was a thing here. And that's what started me on my research journey. But you never know what the catalyst is going to be.
Yeah.
I always
It's
tell
in-
my family it's like it's my sister's fault that I'm weird, but I don't care. I'm so grateful I found it so early on because I was a sensitive kid and meditating in the woods. I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains. Meditating in the woods it changed my entire life.
yeah. Yeah. I also have read Drawing Down the Moon. I read it years ago
Have
as
you?
yeah. So like again, my interest in it was just like, oh, this is interesting. This from an anthropological, like kind of cultural, like I was the kid in school that like loved history. So anything going down the click hole of like history text and stuff, like, oh, okay, cool. Like um any sort of like I should also preface too, I was also interested more in anything kind of pagan, heretical, um just to brace against my Catholic school upbringing as well. So I read a lot of stuff as an act of defiance when I was younger. Plus, I would kind of cherry pick things and be like, oh, I'm going to use that in my D&D like deity system and everything. I read a lot of stuff that I ended up kind of like either bastardizing or culturally appropriating to put into my games, which made them feel more real and everything. So it's interesting because I've read Drawing Down the Moon, and I've read a number of other like important texts either from the United States, Canada, Europe, and other places that are important texts for either spiritual growth, spiritual learning, learning different systems of everything. But again, my mindset at the time was like, oh, I'm going to use this stuff. I'm going to make my other shit over here look really cool and everything. And I never spent the time to look at it from like, all right, I'm an interested seeker. But I think what ended up happening was that when I had this awakening, all those seeds, all those books, like they were literally starting to blossom. Like, hey, remember me? Remember you read me 10 years ago? Go find me again. Go
Yes.
look at this with new eyes. And once I started looking at everything much differently, outside of a very materialist kind of viewpoint, I started looking at people on the street. My natural default mode is like, ah, fuck that guy. Like, and I don't know why. Like, I'll see someone walking and I will be incredibly judgmental. Like, oh man,
You
who's
can
this
tell
guy
that
think
guy's a
he is?
jerk by the way he walks.
Exactly. And that's, after I had this awakening, I'm like, why do I care? Why do I care what this random ass person is doing or wearing or what? How is he harming my chill? Like, how is that person harming my chill? So then I started like really practically asking myself, why do I get so upset or have a reaction to this, that, or the other? Like, it's an active choice on my end. And I've habituated it so much, it's not even active. Like, I just default to a mode. I'm like, that is a sad way to live. And I never gave it a single thought before my awakening. And I'll use the term awakening because I do feel like it's an apt term because prior Tim would have been wouldn't have accepted anything, wouldn't have even given it a thought, would have been just operating on like the most base level of thinking, which you think would be kind of antithetical because as a designer, I'm supposed to question everything that we're doing. Are we making this more human centered? How can we improve this? So it was paradoxical in my approach. Then, after post awakening, post that summer, I am constantly questioning myself. I'm like, why do I hold that belief? Why do I react to that?
Where does
Probably the
that
best
come
example
from?
of this is driving. I am a notoriously defensive driver. I don't know where this comes from. And where we live at in central Pennsylvania, we have more than our fair share of asshole drivers.
And
And
terrible
also
roads and
and
no
terrible
merging
roads.
lanes.
Absolutely. So I always come at everything from a very defensive standpoint when I'm driving. And then when someone even like moves an extra foot out into the road, I'm instantly just like New York cab driver, like, what the hell? Like getting mad at them for everything. And I always question, why am I doing that? Like they can't see. Why am I already prescribing a a persona to that person? Like this is who they are. Like, why? So this awakening helped me question a lot of like my long held beliefs, long held like just practices, like, modes of being. And I was like, why am I asking these questions? Like what's prompting these things? So I ended up having more and more questions. Now you have to remember, I was not this person to question much of anything. I was just like, whatever, doesn't care. I'm indifferent to a lot of things prior to all this. I don't care. It didn't really matter. Now I'm asking questions. Now I'm like really delving into like, why am I this way? Like what has shaped me this? What beliefs do I hold and where are they coming from? Some I can trace back to just how I grew up. Some I can just trace back to just how I've had certain interactions and I'm like, yep, this is goal oriented. And I've just habituated ways of being that were very shallow, that were very goal focused, goal oriented, and honestly, um, one that was, if I can't use you for XYZ purposes, you don't matter. And I'm being completely honest and open this. Like this was a way that I just kind of operated because what was my underlying fears driving me? Like I didn't want to grow up poor because I grew up poor. I wanted to have success in my career because my parents never had that. Um, like I had a lot of like internalized fears and phobias from when I was young, and I was like my damnedest to get those things. And what I didn't realize is that I actually did achieve everything that I ever wanted. I got my nice house. I've got my family. I've got kids. I've got a successful career, but I wasn't satisfied with that. And that kept going. And it was like a festering poison internally for me. And then when I had this awakening, it helped me to actually see things for what it really truly is. And I am so much more ever grateful now of where my life is actually at now. And the way that I continue to kind of check myself is meditation. So I meditate every morning for about 20 to 40 minutes. And I typically have a sound bath, like this like droning kind of sound in the background. And the one that I listen to has like nature sounds in it. It just helps me to relax. And I use a visualization method just to kind of ground myself and focus on my breath to get to a point where when I am sitting in my meditation, I'm very comfortable and I can get very deep very quickly. And I use that to explore intentions, or most of the time, just like Tim, feel grateful about everything. So I'll use that every morning. And then in the evening, I'll use my gateway experience tapes from the Monroe Institute. I initially got into those because of learning about out of body experiences and everything. Oh, there's like meditation tapes, but learning what the Monroe Institute talks about, like these tapes are tools for self-exploration, which was now very much in line with what I wanted to focus on post-awakening. So I use those tapes every night as guided meditations to just kind of like help calm myself. And hey, if I have an out of body experience, cool. I don't really care if I do or not. Like it'll be neat. But I use it more for kind of like a book ending of my day. I start my day with meditation. I end my day with a meditation, and I go to bed. I go to sleep so much easier now. And even my wife has noticed that when I meditate in the evening, I wake up so much more happy and chipper.
Yeah. I think that I mean, you're describing so many key points to different new age or neo-pagan or traditional pagan values or tenets of basic practices. But again, you don't need to ascribe to any sort of specific belief system to reap benefits from these practices, from meditation, from using sound.
Mhm.
I mean, we've studied all of this and it's incredible. But breath work, you described regulating your breathing. So you can use breath work to achieve an altered state of consciousness. And it's from multiple spiritual and I guess we could say pre-modern scientific practices.
Yep.
You see it in yoga, you see it in so many different practices. And the thing that they all have in common is that they will help you regulate your nervous system.
Yes.
For me, meditation helps me tune in after I feel regulated, I feel good, I feel balanced and aligned. I'm then able to kind of tune into higher states of awareness. And being open to learning new things or at least considering them is so beautiful. I call myself a perpetual scholar, and so many of my mentors do as well. And I think that's really it because what is the point if we're not curious, if we're not, learning new things, excited to learn new things, and if we let our ego get in the way of, oh, that's dumb.
Yep.
I mean, I some of it, sometimes I'm talking and I'm like, are you serious, Caitlin? Like, is this seriously what you're talking about right now? Because yeah, that I let my ego get in the way and I'm like, well, you start to cast doubt. But if you really are open, there's so much out there to explore. And it's really wonderful. It's really enriching. And I couldn't believe it when you were like, "Hey, can we get together and chat?" I was like, I was waiting for this. I'm glad you've come to me with this.
So I remember I was in an airport. Where was I? I was coming back from a work trip, my last company. And so this is now, I want to say this year. Yeah, it was this year. It was earlier this year, like March or April. I think it was April. Um, God, I wish I had a calendar. I can remember dates for everything. Um, so I'm coming back from a work trip, and I have the awakening instance that happens in, I'm going to say it was like August of 2023. And I spend that entire summer and fall just like my exploration seeking of things that I would have like previously like, oh, that's dumb or that's stupid. Like exactly what you said, like I'm going to go into it with like an open mind, non-judgmental. There may be very useful things that are true or not true. I don't care. Like I'm going to be a sponge because what hurt does that bring? Nothing. And I can use my own discernment. I'd be like, do I believe it? Is it helpful? Yeah, sure. So then I'm basically like speed running through a lot of like esoteric topics to just be like, try to help me get a grasp. Like, did what I experience, is that exactly what other people are talking about too? So I'm looking at everything through a new lens. So when I hear the word like, oh, I've had an awakening, I'm using that word now because I'm like, actually, that's the best word to use for what I went through. And when I read other people's accounts, I'm like, yeah. And I was always actually drawn more towards experiences where, like, I would say people like myself who never gave a single thought to anything non-physical, non-material at all, and then they have something and it changes there. I'm like, okay, you and I are on the same like wavelength versus someone who's been a practicing, who's had a lot more like I would say spiritual reserves or like has grown up in that more than me because I'm like, well, you're kind of already biased. So like that was my mindset. So initially it was like watching a lot of YouTube videos on near-death experiences, hearing people's experiences. I'm like, oh, that sounds somewhat familiar. And so then all of 2024 happens. And one of the biggest things that was very difficult throughout all of 2024 was now working as a global product design director at a large SaaS platform company, and I'm internally struggling like I don't really give a shit anymore about
The pendulum
any of
swung
this.
too far in the other direction.
Yeah. I don't like, why do I care? Now, I cared for all of my team members. I had a team, I think at the highest level was like 15 team members. I absolutely cared deeply about all their professional development and everything. And I try to create strategies for all of us to be successful. But like, to me, I'm like, this is a job. Like, this really doesn't matter. So that was a little bit of a struggling to try to integrate both like a more spiritual side with like, hey, I got to have a job that pays the bills and keeps that going. But all throughout 2024, I'm having this more seeking stuff. I mentioned the NDEs, the not near death experiences, because that influenced me to look into another seed that was planted in my head years ago, reading about Dolores Cannon. Dolores Cannon is an author, an investigator, helped to develop a type of past life hypnotic regression that was initially focused on self-exploration and healing. And she was a hypnotherapist in like the late 70s, early 80s. I think she only passed away like 10 years ago at this point now. So, but she wrote many, many, many books on past lives and stuff. And I'd always had an interest in that. In fact, I've had two people very early on, before I met my wife and everything, like people that I dated, that randomly, cryptically told me about my past lives. And I was like, that's cool. When are we going to bed? You know, like that's all I cared about. Like, that's cool, whatever. Um, and then and now I'm looking at everything through a different lens. And I'm like, were those women right? Like, so I ended up finding out that Dolores Cannon developed this hypnotherapy called quantum healing hypnotherapy, QHHT.
Okay.
So this all comes back to you and I talking, which was around this time, like I'm coming back from a work trip. And as soon as I get back, I'm having my first QHHT session with a gentleman who's in our area in Lancaster. Shout out to Dan. Uh, I'm at the airport and I get a text message from you. And you're like, hey, I was talking to your wife and she mentioned a few things. And then she mentioned you're having this thing. Would love to hear more about everything. And I'm like, funny you text me because I was thinking, like, I think Katelyn might be interested in some of this stuff. I
Wait,
might.
Tim, what the hell is going on? Come to the dark side. Yeah.
So again, at this point though, like I didn't involve you or include you into anything because I didn't know where our circles overlapped in a lot of things. So the next day I have the QHHT session and I'm in trance. I'm put under trance. I'm all like conked out for everything. And I I'm speaking, not consciously, something is speaking through me. And at the very end of everything, all the questions that were asked, what advice would you have to, like, what should Tim do? Literally at the end it says, seek Katelyn, she has answers. Now, here's a fun story I don't think I told you about with that. I spoke with another person who had a QHHT session. They live in like Arizona, and we got conversing for everything. she told me what her experience was like. She told me what to expect for everything. She's like, just suspend your disbelief. It sounds a little kooky, sounds a little like woo, but trust it. And I really appreciated her correspondence because we don't know each other. I just randomly went on Reddit and was like, anyone have one of these things before? And she messaged me and she was like, yeah, so we emailed each other back and forth. I didn't realize that her middle name is Katelyn. And here I am going back and forth. She shared her recorded session. I shared mine with her, and it was very interesting. So again, like earlier, Tim would have been like, "That's crazy. That's dumb. Like, it's all coincidence. Nothing matters." And I'm like, "Okay." Now I'm like, "Whoa, that, something there." And that's what ended up leading us to meet for coffee for a few hours.
Yeah, yeah. You know what, though? I think skepticism is so normal. I mean, half the time, I'll be, like I said, I just said this earlier, but I'll be in the middle of explaining something. And part of me is going, what are you, like, are you serious, lady? Like, what, you're crazy.
Right.
And then, and then something will happen that'll affirm something else or make me feel more connected. And, you kind of just abandon that sort of thing because life is too short and you can't, if you don't have an open perspective, you won't experience new things.
Right.
That session that you were explaining was so fascinating to me because I had never heard about it. So 25 years learning about everything esoteric. And I'm deep into it. And I had never heard of that, but I did hear of past life regressions. I've been trained in how to do them. It's just not something I really focus on. I've experienced them myself. I really think that when you're in a trance state or when you are in a really deep meditative state, you're very much open to different things. Time becomes less linear. You're able to tap into things that you otherwise wouldn't be. And if you're talking to your higher self or if you're talking to some sort of like divine being, no matter what it is, it's a tool and it's really amazing. It's very powerful. It's so funny because as we were talking, I was trying to remember something that Margot Adler said that reminded me that any sort of belief system, if you boil it down, it transcends. So it transcends no matter what the title is, the label is. You can take what resonates and leave what doesn't.
Right.
But Margot Adler spoke about ritual. And in a way, past life regression, in my opinion, can be considered a ritual or a trance. The purpose of ritual is to change the mind of the human being. It's a sacred drama in which you are the audience as well as the participant. And the purpose of it is to activate the parts of the mind that are not activated by everyday activity. Magic becomes the development of techniques that allow communication with hidden portions of the self and with hidden portions of all other islands in this psychic sea.
It's a pretty apt description, and I would agree with how that is proposed and everything because so much of our lives are like in a way routine, like get up, go to the bathroom, take a shower, take the dog out, complain about traffic, whatever. And that has habituated like certain pathways of thought. And then any sort of ritual or magical practice breaks you out of that entrainment and puts you into a different mode of thinking. Like if I'm being honest, the way that I go about my morning meditation routine is ritualized. And I do it fully knowing that like I'm doing these things to break out of my normal day-to-day like mode of operating and mode of thinking. I don't have to hold my two stones that I like them. It's part of my practice and I just do that because you or someone else are like, "Oh, that's a ritual like practice here." I'm like, "Is it? Yeah, I guess so." I do it because it does. What other part of the day am I holding two stones in my hand? Maybe
Right.
when I'm in the garden, maybe when I'm like weeding stuff, but like no, like typically I will go through certain little things that I'll do during my meditation, and I'm like, yeah, activity, considered a ritual or a magical practice. I look at them like, hey, these are the things that I do that gets me into this kind of like flow state for things. And it's different from anything else. So yeah, there's a lot of parallels there.
But naming it isn't important at all. It doesn't, it
Sure.
doesn't diminish the importance or,
Right.
yeah.
Something that you and I have been kind of talking about here too is just like being open to things and using your discernment. Like, what does it hurt to be open, to take information in? This is why I really do like the Area 52 debriefed podcast is they'll do a lot of like readings of like supposed documents around the UFO stuff. I find the UFO stuff like just incredibly fascinating, but I really don't care about like nuts and bolts UFOs anymore. It's not interesting to me anymore. But what I like is they just like suspend your disbelief for an hour. Just like what does it hurt to take in stuff? And this reminds me of do you remember CD Baby back in like the early 2000s? It was like the way you can get like CDs through the mail.
Oh my gosh, maybe not that one, but I remember the other ones. I'm pretty sure that's how I screwed up my
Yeah, there was like
credit.
CD Warehouse was another big one, but
Yeah, yeah.
CD Baby was a company, I want to say like in the late 90s, early 2000s, where it was like mail order, like, hey, here's a catalog, you can buy your CDs. It wasn't like CD Warehouse, like buy 10 and get one for a penny. Um, but the gentleman who started CD Baby, Derek Sivers, he sold the company, and then unlike any other big entrepreneur or tech bro, something, he's just like, cool, I'm out. And he moved to the Philippines. And he's kind of had this like very sporadic, nomadic, like kind of lifestyle for stuff. And he's been super introspective. His blog, Sivers, like, so SIVE.RS, fantastic. It is a very honest, introspective blog. But where all this comes back to is he wrote a book called Useful, Not True. It's filled with anecdotal stories of things that he's done or other people have told him for things. He's like, is it true? Maybe, maybe not. Is it useful? Yeah. So that I think all goes back to being open for things. So when I started awakening through a lot of things, and then you and I started talking about a lot of things, I had the choice. I could take everything that you said and been like, bullshit, throwing it out the window. Or I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be really open about things. What can it hurt? And then I can ask questions. I'm like, what that resonates? Yeah. And I've also already learned that what was being automatically closed, like what was that doing for me? That was creating a protective cocoon around for me to stay away from any other knowledge. And I was like, why am I doing that? So when I went the full 180, degrees on things and was like having a hard time integrating all of this with my responsibilities of work, I was like, I'm going to be open to things. And I think that is doing me a service. I will read books, recommendations, look at YouTube videos. I will look at things and I'll keep an open mind. And there's something I always get out of everything. I'm like, that's helpful. That's useful. That's actually this thing over here that I already know. It's just in a different context. So awakening has actually helped me become more complete as a human because I can now look at things more on not their face value, but like their actual value of things. So yeah, I highly recommend that book, Useful, Not True, because it's got some really funny stories in it, and they make you stop and think about, was that real? But you did get value out of it.
Oh my gosh, I think that's awesome. I'm gonna check that one out. I haven't read that one. And not that I don't have enough books on my to be read pile, but what's one more, right?
Right.
Yeah, I love learning about new perspectives. I think it's kind of why I have so many random titles and certifications because there's always something to learn. If it's something you don't agree with whatsoever, if you're reading a text, I'm actually reading the complete Picatrix right now, and it's a translation by John Michael Greer and I think I don't know, Christopher Warnock? Warnock? I think it's Warnock. This sort of thing. It's basically a famous grimoire about Renaissance magic, astrological magic, and I don't know why I kind of discounted it, but I've been reading it and it learning about kind of ancient astrology from this perspective. It's a 1,000-year-old Arabic book about astrology.
That's
I
heavy.
have to
That's
warn
cool.
you, it is pretty cool. It's cool. It's fantastic. It's really it's so important because it really influences a lot of, well, the Arabic scholars in that time period, classical astrology, all of that. Really influences a lot of the neo-pagan, the occult. And I know you're not necessarily like an astrology buff like me, and I am only recently an astrology buff. I used to make fun of astrology. So this is where we have yet another similarity. I will tell you that I got in the way of learning so many unique things that I have been able to use as a tool to come to a higher understanding about myself and the world around me as a result as well. And
Yeah.
I'm just glad that I've stopped doing that. But using astrology as a tool is something that I find fascinating. You don't necessarily have to completely believe everything that goes along with it. I'm pretty sure I do. But that might change in a month, you know? I have a science mind. So if something has been disproven, I'll be like, all right, that's disproven and move on. But with with that, you know, just using that as a jumping off point, using it as a tool to come to a higher understanding. It's really that simple. You don't have to label it.
Yep. I think the biggest problem that we have as humans is that we like to label things. We like to organize and categorize things. And that has both been helpful and a hindrance. But at the same time, too, language is incredibly it's an incredible hindrance because when we label something, we can attach other meanings to it. I was listening to I was listening to a new podcast by Mark Manson. They were going through the entire topic about values, and they were going through different values systems. And he even brought it up in this podcast where he was talking about, I think it was Emily Riff, her system of values, and one of her cornerstones of that is environmental mastery. And what that means is like you feel like you're competent, you are able to get the things that you need to do to survive outside of you, like externally. And he had a visceral reaction. He's like, I don't like the word environmental mastery because I equate that to climate. I equate that to this. So like when we talk about like labeling things, it's very hard because like what you might call esoteric, I mean, true word of that just means hidden, like
Yeah.
kind of hidden. That's the actual dictionary definition. But like someone on the street might be like, oh, well, that's this. Like we attach so many emotional and like other definitions to words. That, like words, language are hard, and labeling things, we have a tendency to do that just as humans, and it becomes its own hindrance in like seeking and like learning more stuff. So yeah, it's like a paradox there. I want to learn more about this. Oh, don't don't get so hung up on the name about it. This is
Yeah.
why I like the gateway stuff because in a lot of ways, there's so many parallels to other practices, other belief systems and everything, but the way that the gateway experience has been kind of stripped and sanitized in a way that removes any of those other labelings makes it approachable for people who want to experience and like practice meditation in a way. But for those who are already kind of in the know, they're like, oh yeah, that's exactly what this is. So yeah, I think labeling is hard. Words are hard in general. So,
Words are hard. So you talked
quote
a
of
little
the podcast, words are hard.
You talked about the gateway process a little bit, and
Sure.
so it was developed by the Monroe Institute, and it uses like meditation or trance techniques to combine what I think with the binaural the sounds. So
Binaural beats.
you suggested listening to it with like a good pair of
Good.
headphones or whatever. Are they still
Yeah.
called headphones? Am I further sinking into my elder millennial dumb?
Yeah,
Is
no,
it
they're still called
headphones?
headphones. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think they're really fascinating. There are people who have claimed that those tapes have given them psychic abilities or that they're able to visualize things. There are people that claim that it just allows them to relax. And that's another message because it doesn't matter if it enriches your life, it helps you feel okay. You
Right.
and I always say, what do we always say? That we're meat puppets. We're
Yes, I am. I have a very dark humor for things. We're just electrical meat bags walking
yes,
around.
we're meat ba we are. We're meat bags that have developed sentience for whatever reason.
I would flip it. I would say we're spiritual beings having a human experience,
Okay, yes,
and
I
we're
agree with
we're
that.
we're running with electrical meat bags right now.
I agree with
Um,
that. That's our operating system is not as important, or I'm sorry, our hardware is not as important as our software, and that's not
right,
even as important as the code.
right. So to actually make this even more real, like our human experience is like your laptop, ancient, old, and just like falling apart, but our software is great.
I am being dragged relentlessly into the world of modern technology, and I am not here for it. I have this ancient Sony laptop that is falling apart. Every time I pick it up, like the shell cracks. Tim's making fun of me, just so you guys don't know that. One day, I will delve into the world of recording these on video so you can see my ridiculous facial expressions and that will happen. But until I relent, yeah, until I begrudgingly update my laptop, that's not going to happen.
All
But
good.
oh yeah, it's definitely in need of an upgrade there.
Well,
It'll
there
happen one day.
it, well, you can still use headphones on your computer, and they're still called headphones to this day. But back to your question about the gateway experience was that so Bob Monroe, he was a radio exec, like he was a big time executive, and he had a spontaneous out of body experience, and he's written about it in his book Journeys Out of the Body and everything. He was not seeking this at all. He just had an experience that he was like, "What is this?" And it led to his own seeking. He's like, "What is this? Like, why?" And he was interested in like the mental world. He was interested in like how the physical world interacts with stuff. And he then developed his binaural beats. Like he had a broadcast background and he knew how to do sound production for stuff. And he developed the first binaural beats that people started associating with like one frequency in one ear versus another, hearing in between there a median tone. And through a lot of just experimentation, he was able to create a series of like guided exercises, guided meditation exercises that were using these binaural beats that would get you to altered states of consciousness. Many years later, the CIA did contract with the Monroe Institute to hopefully try to make psychic spies and everything. Like there's a whole funny movie called The Men Who Stare at Goats, which is
Yes,
all about it's hilarious and it is a direct correlation back to the Monroe Institute. The Monroe Institute still exists today. You can go to the Monroe Institute and do like a week-long retreat where you just learn the gateway experience, you listen to the tapes. And the application or the goals of the tapes, which you can buy, you can get the recordings for everything, and you have to use good headphones, like non-noise canceling ones, because you need to hear the tones. The application for it, as Bob put together, was self-exploration, self-enrichment. Like you can use these exercises to grow, just to grow and have a better understanding of yourself and create a little bit more equilibrium in your life. And he's never claimed like, hey, we're going to make you psychic. We're going to make you transcend mortal coil. Like you're going to start talking to aliens next week. People have said that they've had those and they've had experiences like that. I'm not discounting them. I haven't had them, but who am I to say that those are not real?
sure.
But the information is incredibly useful. So when I use the gateway tapes, I use it as an exploration to think about my day, to create a little bit more mental clarity, to be more grateful about things. And, sure, if I listen to it long enough and I get into a super relaxed like state for things, I feel better. can I take it a next step further? Absolutely. There is things that I'd be interested in that would have a direct application on my life, like a practical direct application. But hell, if I had an out-of-body experience, I'm sure that would be interesting. I'm not discounting those things. When people say they've had experiences and interactions under these different altered states of consciousness through the tapes, great, cool. You know, again, prior to my awakening, I would have ridiculed and questioned anyone's sanity. But now, since having gone through my awakening and practicing for stuff, I feel much happier as a person, more open, more accepting of things in life now because I'm not living in such a closed-minded perspective for things. I think that even you can attest when you and I have had other conversations outside of stuff, pretty, yeah, just check this out. Like, I'm not holding back on any sort of weird reservations for stuff because you don't know what else you could learn. You don't know what else could come out of it. And I believe, in the business world, they talk about like creative thinking, growth mindset. I'm like, this is all just a rebrand of the same kind of stuff, but it's being applied here. I think throughout the 90s, there was a trope in comedy movies that all the CEOs were practicing meditation, meditation experts, and they were using transcendental meditation. And it became so pastiche and like, oh, passe, like, oh yeah, all, but there's a reason why
Yeah.
it helped. It helped those folks, and then it became a meme even before memes became a thing. That's showing our age there. That became a trope, and I'm like, well, you know what? There's something there. There's something to it, and I would say that the practical application of a lot of this stuff. Now that I'm still working as a product design director. I'm leading a new team here in the next week or so for a new company, and I am integrating things better. And I'm feeling as a person, which I think a lot of people, regardless of what other interests or their backgrounds, they want to feel happier, more fulfilled, more at peace in their life. I
Yeah.
would say what I've kind of practiced and stuff has brought that for me. And
Yeah.
I think the one thing that anyone can kind of take away from anything is just be open to things and use your discernment. Take what works, leave what doesn't.
Yeah. Well, as you know, I'm a meditation instructor. I've been meditating probably since I was 7 or 8 years old. I didn't label it meditating until I was probably in late teen years. And even then, I took a break from it with a healthy dose of skepticism, as is natural in your teen years. And shameless plug, you and I are actually embarking on a little bit of a journey here together. We're going to be hosting a meditation retreat in York County, Pennsylvania. It's a few hours long. Again, there's absolutely no dogma attached to it. There's no belief system. I have my own belief. Pick one. I've got several belief systems. And Tim has his own gnosis, which doesn't necessarily have a label. But we've joined together and recognized how beneficial meditation has been for us. And how really just life altering it can be to achieve that sense of balance, that sense of wellness and calm. We are so enmeshed in technology. We make thousands of decisions a day, and we have evolved really quickly into doing way too much too quickly. And our minds really need a break. We really need to slow down and embrace mindfulness. I'm saying we, but I absolutely also need to do that. And that's why I'm so passionate about meditation and why I've taught so many different meditation classes. Yeah, so we're going to be doing that. I'm excited to do that with you.
I'm pumped. Like this is as we've been talking about this event together and talking about things. Again, it is also a reaffirmation and a validation of like here we are talking about this event we're going to do in September. Here you and I have for kind of like weeks now have been developing ideas around for everything. None of that would have ever come to fruition if Like we both weren't being like open. Like we would have, so many like interstitial steps had happened for that to become a reality. And I think that's also goes for a lot of folks who think like, oh, I could never do this. I could never do X, Y, or Z. I could never do this thing. That self-limiting belief. I was the king of self-limiting beliefs for a long time, as well as being very haughty and like arrogant. I'm like, oh, you told me no? Fuck that. I'm gonna do that. Like, I'm gonna go and do that just to prove you wrong. So like I think that there is something also that people can take away from this episode. And if they happen to come to our event, there is a level of like self-limiting beliefs. And if you just dial that back a bit, like just be a little bit more open, you would be so surprised what actually comes out of that. And but I think that's what a lot of people can take away from this is just being just that little bit more open, finding those things that are useful, maybe not true, and taking things that they can incorporate into their life at a practical way and integrating it. It's just that tiny shift that makes a big difference in perspective. So
Mhm. It's
that
so
was a big
funny.
full circle
No,
rant.
it's absolutely true. But just keep thinking that like I'm being dragged relentlessly into the tech future, and you're being dragged relentlessly into the woo. I mean, we should entitle this podcast the Skeptic and the Witch, right? Previous skeptic, previous.
I like that though.
I just think, I don't know. I just think that that's what makes it approachable. Thank you for making this approachable, and thank you for allowing that to be because again, I always tell people, I always say, take what resonates and leave what doesn't. And that sounds like a cop out, doesn't it? But really, it's important because if you're discounting something because you think that it's not going to be beneficial to you, how do you know? And if you try it and you're like, this is not for me, cool, you know now. I mean, just
Yeah.
sinking further and further into what makes you tick, learning about yourself, that absolutely allows you to come to a higher standing about the world around you.
Plus it's fun. I mean,
Oh,
I
it is
think there's
fun.
a level of like learning about things doesn't have to be tiresome or dogmatic or just like, oh, like go into it with some fun. Like, I think when I started getting into meditation, I was not coming into it from a perspective of fun. I was just like, what the hell is going on? Like, I
Yeah.
need to do this and everything. But now, a lot of the things I go into with an open mind, like, oh, what can be fun? What can come
Yeah.
out of this? This is pretty cool.
Yep.
And even if like a conversation, an activity that I'm doing, like even if most of it's like, all right, yeah, same, whatever. Or something, I can always look at something with like a little bit of fun. So like you hear that phrase, like find the silver lining. There's so many cliched sayings and so they go in one ear out the other. But if you actually do stop and think about like, well, why do people say that often? There's probably a little kernel of truth to it. Like find the silver lining. I'm like, yeah. So I try to approach everything with that. I think if a lot more folks just had that little like openness of like maybe there'll be something cool comes out of this. But no, I'm really appreciative of being able to come on the show here and being able to share my experience. Again, to use a cliched statement, like I can do this, anyone can do this. I think that where I was previously was such a very hollow existence of just interacting with the world. I look back on myself and I'm equally amazed and horrified of just where how far I've come in a lot of ways. And I can say that with confidence. I've come to a different point of thinking about things that looking back on myself, like I would never want to go back to that, nor could I ever. But I'm also incredibly appreciative and grateful that like I have a lot more self-awareness. I have a lot more grace in just how I interact with folks and just think about myself and giving myself a lot more self-acceptance for things that, it's an incredible growth for myself and I'm continuing to learn. Like I'm going to always continue to seek out and try to understand more about myself. And I think that's the fun of this existence as electrical meat bags right now. What's the goal here? To learn. And I think that's the journey.
Yeah. We are the universe experiencing itself.
Yep.
I I love that. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for your honesty and your story.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. I really appreciate it. And yeah, anyone who wants to sync up with me, find the information about me down below in the show notes for stuff. I'm pretty open to talking with everybody. So thank you very much for having me on today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tim.